and it was about Paul. We realised it was a ransomware attack. So they opened this file in controlled circumstances, and there it was.
But when you get to that point as owner, leader of the business, with 900 people, in your team, what's going through that? What's going through your mind at that point?
Knowingly that you don't really know it's going to be okay, but you have to be optimistic. We're always fairly optimistic as people. Our team trusted us.
And there's so many prompts that you get now for saving passwords, saving information, just on a personal level, let alone business level, that you can see.
IT and technology at the time, I have to say that it was at the bottom of the priorities on the board agenda, whereas health and safety and welfare was at the top. And I think that was through an element of, I wouldn't say complacency, I think that's unfair, but we felt we'd got that covered off.
Did you consider paying the ransom? Hello, my name's Richard Smith, and welcome to the next edition of Roadway, the podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a specific subject that can affect any part of this industry at any time, and ourselves in our personal lives. So we've titled today's episode, Living on the Front Line Through a Ransom Attack. And I'm joined by Paul Abbott, who in a moment I will introduce Paul. I'm just asking him to give a little bit of background of his career in this industry, and then we'll specifically talk about a situation about 2 years ago now, I think it was, Paul, that occurred in his business. So, Paul, welcome and thank you very much. Just a little bit about yourself, the industry, who you are, etc.
Oh, thank you, Richard, and good to see you today, and thank you for asking me to be involved in the podcast. I've been involved in transport logistics all my life, and I can say that through the reason being my father and my grandparents were involved in coaches and haulage. And it seemed a natural thing for us to sort of follow on, and sort of started working in a family business for a period, and then branched out into the big wide world of private sector opportunities that came about for me, and eventually became a part owner in Knights of Old, the KMP Logistics Group, back in 2012, when we did a management buyout. So seeing it from the bottom all the way up to the sort of high levels.
And if I might say, Paul, a very successful career to on that journey, which is, commendable to you, and obviously experienced a lot through that journey.
Indeed.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, 2 years ago now, nearly 2 years.
Yes, it was just over 2 years. Yeah.
KMP was subject to a ransom attack.
It was, yeah.
So if you just for the purpose of the viewers or the listeners, just explain briefly what I mean by when I say a ransom attack.
Well, we'd got, the KMP Knights of Old Group had evolved to a £100 million turnover business. It was growing, not without its operational challenges that are commonly talked about today still. But, we committed to investment and growing the business organically and also through acquisition. So we had around 900 people in the business. And, across the groups, 4 key companies, essentially, one of them being Knights of Old, Nelson Distribution, Steve Porter Transport, and Merlin Supply Chain. And that was generally sort of transport, haulage, logistics, shipping, freight forwarding. So we were fairly complex as an organisation. Certainly don't think we were a jack of all trades and masters, but I'd like to think we were pretty good at most things we did, and we did them well. And, with that, it commands that you do need a fairly robust and complex technology platform to be able to execute your business, your services, and enable the people to perform, as we wanted them to, and as we aspired to as a business. So we had we invested quite heavily in IT technology and resources internally and externally. We always felt that we were responsible as directors. We took health and safety seriously. We took compliance seriously. And, the general well-being of people was always high up on our priority list. IT and technology at the time, I have to say that it was at the bottom of the priorities on the board agenda, whereas health and safety and welfare was at the top. And I think that was through an element of, I wouldn't say complacency, I think that's unfair, but we felt we'd got that covered off. We felt we were spending enough money on it. and we felt that we were fairly resilient in that respect, and having experienced minor breaches, phishing emails, and contained them very well, having the staff around us that recognised an issue and contained it, we felt that we were in a pretty good place. But nevertheless, we had an incident where it was a ransomware attack. It was a serious group, quite well known, that breached our systems and encrypted all of our servers and functionality from a technology basis.
And just before I go on from then, Paul, if I may, so I think it's fair to say from an industry perspective as well, to give it some context, is that KMP were a large operator. You're viewed as a large operator, those number of people.
Certainly larger of the SME.
Larger of the SME, of a standard of high credibility, where you were viewed as a quality business, investing in future technologies such as electric vehicles, trialing, various opportunities. So in the industry would be viewed as a forward-looking, forward-thinking, a business that does invest in itself and therefore well protected perception-wise in this area which you're about to describe. What happened on the day of the actual attack?
And just to endorse that, back in 1985, 86, Knights of Old, one of the first customers of Roadtech computers. So we adopted computerization in the workplace fairly early on.
Yeah.
And I liked that we sort of kept that moving in that direction of that sort of general ethos.
And I think when you say that IT was down on the agenda, having worked for larger operators in the industry myself and in a similar position, it was always down on the agenda as IT, because it's something that people that understand it do, and they just feed into the board. Perception-wise, over the last 10 to 15 years, that's certainly changing now because of what we're about to talk to. But one of the clear messages, certainly from myself and the RHA, and I'll let Paul summarise at the end, is that IT and certainly the security of your systems needs to be at the top of the agenda, because it is the business.
These days, definitely.
So moving on to the actual event itself of actually, how did the criminals actually get in, Paul?
Well, it would appear, having the feedback from the forensic team that were appointed by the insurers that we had, after their initial research, it would appear that the threat attackers managed to get password details from one of the operators, and essentially they logged in rather than hacked in. And I think that's a general feeling today, that these attack groups are logging in rather than hacking in. They're through social engineering and different ways of duping or obtaining credentials to get into a system. And I think we saw something similar with M&S, whereas that was a serious breach, as we all know, very well documented and publicised. And essentially those attack groups that obtain password details that are then allowed the people onto a framework, a network, and then they start hacking their way through various different levels of security, which is exactly what they did with her.
And there's so many prompts that you get now for saving passwords, saving information, just on a personal level, let alone business level, that you can see. So when did you, as a group of directors, become aware there was a problem in your business? How did it resonate with you? When did you realise something's not quite right?
In terms of the actual
In terms of the actual attack, yeah.
Well, it was a Tuesday night, normal night of operations. I'd actually been out on an event with Renault Trucks talking about EVs that evening, but came home, but been busy. And about the following morning, as I normally would, and then we see the night handover that comes through that goes to all sort of operational stakeholders. And on there was a report from the supervisor saying they had some problems with computer systems, having troubles accessing certain programs. It was able to get to the tracking system. That was because that was cloud-based, and that was a web-based program. And a couple of other things were working okay, but it would appear that we got a problem with some servers. And this went on from about midnight. Our internal team were working on fixing it. And the characteristics at the time were not something that they hadn't sort of seen before, either through a disk failure. We got a lot of on-premises servers because of the framework that we needed as a business. Yes, so as they continue to work and look at that, we asked, is this a cyber attack? Is it? Said, we don't think so. okay, then we need to sort of switch on the backup servers, which are on another site at the other end of the side of town. And at that point, when those servers wouldn't fire up either, I think at that point it was sort of realised that there was something that was beyond what had happened before. And as they went through a controlled shutdown of these servers to then do a restart, it became apparent, and this was somewhere around about 3 o'clock the following afternoon. So we'd already invoked a DR, action for keeping the operation running, and then it came about 3 o'clock in the afternoon that we needed to do this restart. The restart failed, and then continued to sort of retry, and then eventually the restart continued, and then this was into the early evening, and there was a file that appeared that was alien to the system in the script as it's restarting, and it was about Paul. We realised it was a ransomware attack. So they opened this file in controlled circumstances, and there it was. It was the Akira group telling us all our systems are down, which we knew, and we could have them back if we contacted them via the X link and enter into negotiations, let the insurance company know, and they'll handle it all for us. So we're very clear about what we did next, or what they felt that we should do next. But at that point, we realised that I think when one of the trusted IT team seniors come to you with a paraphrase saying we're in trouble here and we can't fix it. Normally these are people that come with fix it, not the explanations that we're in a really bad situation.
And at that point, I mean, I can relate to part of that. It's only a very, very small part of it, having lost the site for 48 hours, but it was always going to be recoverable, and this was 2008, 2009, it was an out and out. We just needed a part to be brought in from America. But when you get to that point as owner, leader of the business, with 900 people, in your team, what's going through that? What's going through your mind at that point? What do you do next?
Well,
a
number of things, Richard, going through your mind is, first of all, what do I need to do now? What do I need to do immediately? And that first thing is sit down quietly and really think about what next steps we take in a very, and I don't mean take an hour, I mean the next few seconds, decide what to do next. So once we'd done that, we'd got an insurance policy that we were able to contact the helpline. Once we'd done that, and we'd got the right people in place to deal with what was going on immediately, like an immediate response, incident response, first response, it was then, right, okay, how's this going to roll out? The initial call with those first responders was not positive at all, and it was a reality thing to prepare for 14 days before, on average 14 days before you're stable. You're going to get fatigue, you're going to need to manage a number of different things, people are going to wear out, and then you've got to think, I've got to go out of my office now having listened to that, and I've got to go and tell all these people out there that it's going to be okay. And knowingly that you don't really know it's going to be okay, but you have to be optimistic. We're always fairly optimistic as people. Our team trusted us, and I always felt that where there is a will, there's a way, where we've got the right team around us, we've got the right first response people around us, we've got the right attitude, and the people that worked in the teams, the managers, the team leaders, they bought into this from the moment one, and they kept the heat on, they kept the pressure on, they worked themselves to make sure that we kept orders coming in, freight moving, trucks moving. That was our key focus, and we felt that actually, provided we can keep the customers serviced and communicate and keep delivering positivity in some shape or fashion.
So at this point,
So
at this point, you're beyond what I would call, having had a few business recovery plans. This is far more than that because of the position. You'll be on a manual process. So you'll be
very manual process.
You'll be there logging everyone in, logging everybody out.
Well, exactly. It's more about being able to take orders.
Yeah.
So we'd got some clean. We'd actually got a pack of tools that we're able to call on in the event. Now this was an operational DR, business continuity, and it worked. It was tested previously, not through cyber risk, but through power outage, internet outage. So we knew these things were the plugging. I wouldn't say it happened often, but they sort of knew how to do this. They knew the 3-part paperwork came out, the clean laptops came out, we could build spreadsheets. And that night, the first night, we still ran 40 trunks out of groupage. So that gives you an idea of the resilience of the team and the teamwork that went on. And everybody bought into it.
But there's only, as I said, I think you already said that, there's only a certain period of time you can do that for, because of the effort required to manually run a huge organisation in that context.
Normally it's good for a few hours.
Yeah.
Maybe 12 hours at the most, and then you could spend a week trying to catch up once you got systems back. We're also very, very fortunate, and it's something now that I hold in quite a precious asset when I talk to people, is that we acquired a business, Steve Porter Transport, who'd actually got a local guy that wrote their transport management system. And after a few hours of looking at emptiness and nothing working, a couple of them all quietly chatting amongst themselves, and they thought, well, we think we can resurrect this piece of software over the weekend. So we were very, very lucky where we got these people and this little bit of software that was polished up over the weekend that turned into a multi-user, online, web-based transport management system that could take orders and really, really help move things away from a lot of the manual process. There was still a lot of manual activity going on, but this took an awful lot. This was 50% to whereas we could nothing to 50%, I think, overnight. And that generally gave some encouragement to the team. So, right, we're on this now, we can crack this. And that did actually buy us the time that we needed to restore the system.
So in terms of a communication perspective, because as you said, I mean, leadership is obviously one thing, well, and the communication of the plan or, the strategies it develops is another thing. Obviously, the sensitivity around communication must be significant because you've got customers, you've got competitors, you've got, as you said, the people that are actually doing the job, and it's about the more tired people getting the more effort they put in. They do need the arm around the shoulder, they do need a reason, so the communication internally, which has been one part, but externally as well. So what was the communication externally at this point?
Okay, so let's look at both of those. Yeah. They're both really, really important. So the external communications, there are legal things that you have to do in terms of the communication. You have to report to the ICO. If you don't report to the ICO when you've got data breaches, and that's a normal GDPR thing, to be fair, then you could be in a lot of trouble. That's where the risk sits really with the business. If it's not disruption of the business, then in terms of legalities, that's where it is the data breach that is the risk. So we were fortunate enough, we'd got lines in to do that. So we got that covered off. And at that point, we needed to tell customers that we'd had a breach. We were very fortunate in as much that the nature, but a lot of the key customers that we dealt with were blue chip organisations, certainly in the publishing sector. Most of them have felt or had experience in either directly or indirectly of a cyber attack from other platforms, other service providers, whether they're parcel carriers or software providers. So they weren't, or even themselves. So it wasn't an uncommon thing to talk about. There was a lot of empathy there, and there was a lot of support. And all they really wanted to do was to be sure that we were going to rock up and turn up and pick up the cargo and deliver it. And the answer to that was yes. Because we felt that provided we could maintain the service and didn't give any cause to say that we were unable to fulfill what we did as a business, we felt that essentially, I wouldn't say it would be home and dry, but that would be the key priority to make sure we could continue to run the business. And we did. And, and not without the commitment of the teams and around that we'd got around us, to effect that. And so the customers were more worried about, is there any data out? Are you going to turn to do the job? Have you got any data sensitive to us or our customers, their customers, that's been breached? And the answer to that was, after a very short space of review, short time of review, it was no, because we were essentially business to business. So very little personal data there, very little intellectual property that we held. So that was low risk, and once we'd sort of satisfied that, and we kept the communication going, we got fortunate access to really good legals that guides us through this for external and internal. So these are the tools in the box that we had, and by luck than judgment, but we had them, and I think that's what we have to sort of recognise.
Did you consider paying the ransom? If that's not a foolish question.
Yeah, we did, because I think, and this is a question that often becomes asked, is, well, would you pay the ransom? And the answer is yes. If I thought I was going to get my business back, then why wouldn't you? And I've got money, why wouldn't you? And I know there's a moral thing where the authorities don't really want you sort of thinking about that. But at the end of the day, you've got a business, and this isn't just about your investment. This is about the livelihood of the 900 people that work there, plus the dependents.
Yeah.
Of course you're going to pay it. Why wouldn't you? You put those things priority. But we did go through the channels of actually sort of evaluating how we would enter those negotiations. And one thing that you don't do it directly yourself. You get somebody involved that's the seasoned negotiation. We had access to that as well, but we decided not to.
And certainly, two words that are very common these days: cyber insurance. So you see a lot of people, I use the word pushing cyber insurance, offering cyber insurance, talking about, you had cyber insurance, how valuable was it to you during this?
Yeah, and I think it's something that's come up before, is the fact that, did we feel that we were in a good place as a business? Yeah, we did, because we'd got certain accreditations in, and we'd procured an insurance policy that was, at a time, it was quite difficult to get cover for a size of the business, and we'd got it, and we invoked that policy. I think on reflection, it was the policy did what you would expect it to do, and probably it probably did more for us at the time, because it gave us access to legals, it gave us access to highly skilled first responders that were able to come in, contain the situation, and direct us of how we actually recover from. So it was a case of working with them as a unit, and they had to take control of this. So our IT team had to sort of take direction from them. We had to take direction from them. And that was hard for some people to take on board. It's my business. I'm going to do what I want. With a great respect, if you don't follow the routine, then you won't achieve what you need to do, as hard as it might seem.
So it gave you expert advice and your specialist support.
Yeah, and I think with insurance, I'm going to say it's a minefield, because I think there is good insurance. There's not such good insurance out there. I think just the fact that you bought insurance shouldn't be seen as a cushion, although it is a cushion, but also it's only going to be effective if you embrace it and select the right policy and have the right approach before you need to even invoke it. Because I think more than anything else, this is expensive. So, if you are, and I think it's more of a case of when rather than if there's a disruption or a breach of some kind. Might not be cyber, might be natural disasters or something like that. But I think either way, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So you need an awful lot of cash around you to work through it, as well as the insurance, and I think that was one of the things we found a challenge, to actually realise the claim will take some time.
So from the Tuesday night, I think you said it was Tuesday night, when the breach occurred, up to and I remember this being announced to the industry, that KMP was going into administration. I remember it vividly, which was a huge surprise, to everybody. What sort of time period was that, and how did it end up in that position, as much as you can say to us, obviously?
Yeah, it's certainly nothing that's going to leave me in my lifetime. It's not something that we felt remotely that we would be having to deal with this as business owners. So the breach was on the 14th of July. The business was, we were instructed to close the business on the 23rd of September the same year. So just shy sort of 4 months, really. And we didn't anticipate that this would be the cause of why we had to do this. We felt that we'd kept the customers on board, we'd stabilised the operation, we'd maintained the sales, we'd even put new contracts on within 6 weeks of the breach. So the business itself, operation, was moving forward. We'd previously opened a new warehouse in Luton back in the December of 2022, which took all of our cash. So our cash was fairly well depleted. So, from the attack group, if they thought they would tap in somebody with a load of cash, they've got the wrong people. But that's where I think, why did they attack us is another questionable point. So we're all in discussion with our lenders to replenish that working capital in a positive way. All they needed was our mobile information. Their financials, which again, through the breach, was proving more and more difficult to actually produce. And I think this is the point within the BI, the business continuity, that it didn't really go deep enough into all aspects of the business. So operationally, it worked really, really well.
Yep.
And I commend what we had and the way people executed that. But that the financials commanded a different approach to what we'd actually got around us at the time. So if you think about £100 million business, it's buying fuel, it's bringing cash in, it's servicing customers, the day-to-day part. And then if the lender, the bank, whatever you want to call it, if they start to lose a bit of visibility for what's going on end to end, which they had, but they were very trustworthy. They've been very tolerant and patient up to a point, but it gets to a point where that time starts to run out about how you can, what you've got to actually give the reports. And at that point, we ran out of time. We just couldn't. The team of the people that we've got, even some expert people we've got working with us on some fairly big ticket costs, weren't able to restore the data for us to even present to a lender or indeed an investor at the time, which forced us then to sort of say, we've got to close the business.
And again, at the time, it's fair to say as well, and without labouring the point, after all that effort, and skill and ability and leadership, I use this word from my position. I can't imagine to use a word that you'd use. It's disappointing, frustrating. What can you do? It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking is a good word. It's heartbreaking for me, and I wasn't financially or emotionally invested in it. So it closed, if you remember that. And what's Paul Abbott doing now?
So since life changed in quite a dramatic way a couple of years ago, I'm now quite heavily involved in consulting, both on cybersecurity risk, general risk management, and general transport solutions. And we are back in the transport business on a small scale with a company under the guise of Yarrow Group, operating out of Huntingdon into where we live, which is, it's what I've done all my life, and it's feel quite comfortable in that arena. So we'll see where it takes. Just don't have any intention to rule the world, but just do a good job and enjoy what we do.
So again, if we come towards a close, if there's, what are the top recommendations you would give to an organisation? Just top 4 or 5. What would you say if you're going to do anything as a minimum? Do this. Difficult question, maybe, from your learnings.
It is. Well, I didn't think as a business, as an organisation at top level, we employed people, we employed experts to do the expert things. We were truckers, we were commercial, getting business, running trucks. That's what we did, operational. We hired in finance, we hired in IT. But we became better informed about health and safety, and that was through our insurers that insisted that we actually undertook an OSHAS course so that we could lead health and safety in a better way. We did that, and I believe that businesses should do similar with when it comes to cyber risk, or certainly become better informed about where your risk is. Not become the expert, but I think if you're better informed, you will make better decisions. So you can then collectively work with your tech teams, with your managed service providers, and genuinely work together to come up with the best solutions, but on an informed basis, rather than go out and think about whether I need to buy this product. Is this a good product? I don't know. Be informed is one of the key things. Selecting the right partners, benchmarking the partner's ability and acid testing them. And I think you certainly resilience, test the resilience of your own business. And it's not something you can do on your own. You do need to get in a third party, managed service provider or, a security organisation to do that. Penetration test, they call it. And it's really important that you do that. Training, as a business at Knights Cambridge, we had a really good training culture. We felt that people were aware, but it's not something that you do once and sit it down. So the training and that, and I think there's 2 other things really. One is insurance. I think insurance can be a competitive investment, although some of our members that I've spoken to think that's expensive, and I'm thinking, well, the cost of not having it, the cost of it compared to a new truck or a trailer, is half the cost of a new trailer, and if it's going to give you what you need in the event that something goes really wrong, then I think it's money very well spent. It's very much well nice.
It's an investment.
Absolutely it is.
But like RHA membership, you can cut that bit if you want. Sorry, go
on. The actual key takeaway, the one thing, is that if you don't do anything else, make sure your business can continue to function in the event that you've got something that wants to stop it functioning. Because if you can't continue as a business, you can't service your customers, you haven't got a business. So for me, business continuity is a critical thing. And I've been involved in an organisation that's had a DR plan that thick, how much of it's workable. Because essentially, if it's not on 2 sheets of A4 and a properly mapped out, tested program, then that's pointless.
Yeah.
It might satisfy a tender that you've got that.
You're not going to read that when it goes wrong.
No, you're definitely not. You're going to want probably 1 sheet of A4 with some checklists about what are we going to do now and who's going to do it, and test it. So equally, test your defences, but also test your resilience on your business continuity. And that's if you don't do anything else.
And finally, before we close, I mean, first of all, it's, today's subject's been very informative. It's real life. This really happened, And I think, the fact that you sat talking to us this afternoon about it is a credit to you, and it shows your resilience over the last 2 years. Because I remember the day when it was announced, and I've, known you during that journey since, and it's testament to what you do now and the fact you put it back in the industry. So thank you for that. This instalment of the podcast has been on a real life example, and listen to Paul's words. If you don't do one thing, what is it, Paul? If you just do one thing, what is it that we should do?
Make sure your business can run in the event somebody tries to stop it.
Go back to T cards and bits of paper. Can it work?
Yeah. Well, if anybody does want any help or advice on that, I'm happy to engage via the RHA or direct. I'm on LinkedIn, so people can find me if they want, but I'm very happy to help and support where I can.
And we'll pop a link at the bottom of the podcast. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. It's been my pleasure.